the first thing that we did, we laughed about it and said, you guys can't do that. There's so many established players here. It's such a tight market. You have no experience. And same thing, like, why not? Why can't you do it? So it's almost a catalyst for us and a motivating factor when we get these comments, and they fuel us even more to get it done.
Welcome to episode 107 of the AFT Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Levitt, and in this episode, I speak with Max de Melo and Patrick Niederdrenk. And Patrick and Max, they're both real estate entrepreneurs. They're with American One Real Estate, and they are doing some incredible luxury development here in Phoenix. And they will be expanding. They're both originally from Germany, came to America, have an incredible vision for luxury real estate. And we spoke about the growth, what it takes to get from the initial vision to now be in this market. How do you work with investors? How does that feasibility study work? What are the complexities of doing a luxury development? And how do you tie this all together? There was some amazing advice they gave for the luxury market, what they see forecasting in the future, and what really has been a strength to them to build their business, especially in regard to marketing. So this is an episode you don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's get started. So welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast. I'm Brad Levitt, and we have two special guests with us today. We have Max de Melo, and we have Patrick Niederdrenk with us today. And I'm a huge fan of them. They are real estate entrepreneurs doing some amazing high-end luxury real estate. And this has been long overdue to have you guys on, so welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Brett.
And we actually have them here in person because there are little local celebrities here in town, right? They're doing some amazing things in town. And so let's start here. Right now, you guys have over 90,000 square feet of luxury development here in town. So how's that going?
It's going. I mean, you know the deal. It's right now. It's a little challenging with getting everybody on schedule and on time, and budgets getting thrown off a little bit. So, but then again, having multiple projects, you have a little bit of a leverage, so you can maybe hold people a little bit more accountable or get stuff done a little bit faster. But it is still it's getting better. But definitely could tell there was a little bit of a hiccup last 12 months. But other than that, it's going well. We have different types, those 90,000 split up into the ones where we're involved in construction, we're more involved in design project management. So we kind of cover all bases on the construction side, and that's how that adds up pretty quick.
So how did you guys get into this? I mean, because from a developer side, I mean, you guys know real estate, you have connections to investors. I mean, you're doing luxury development yourself, and you're also doing a lot more than just finding a contractor. You're involved in design, you're involved in architecture. How did all that come together?
It kind of came pretty organically, to be honest. We started with a little flip that was 4 years ago. It's a little townhome, just under 1,000 square feet. Just did an interior remodel. That was the first deal that we did. And at that time, quite honestly, we didn't really, we had no experience. The money that we put into the deal was our money, so that's all we had at the time. And we just got into it, I guess, and we enjoyed the process and never looked back. And then from there on, we did another one, a little bit bigger one. The first one price point was around $100,000. Actually, at that time, you could even buy a townhouse for that in Scottsdale, Old Town. And then just the deals got bigger. And then after interior remodel, we started adding square footage. Patrick kind of found his passion in figuring out how to use the existing kind of building envelope, add on, reconfigure. Then we started taking roofs off, and next thing you know, we're into new builds. So,
and now, because you started with flips, you gone to mostly new build now, all development. And thinking about that, it's interesting as I speak to companies, and it's really important that you are focused, right, on what your goal is. But at the same time, there has to be some versatility, right? Because economies, they ebb and flow. There's changes. You have to deal with that. And for you guys, it's not just traditional realtor where, hey, I'm going to list a home, I'm going to sell a home. You're like, hey, we're going to go into the development side. We're going to flip. We're going to do our own development. I mean, so that is a big transition. I mean, how has that grown? How long did it take you to take from that first flip to now you're doing these super high-end luxury developments here in town?
Just looking at the years, it's been a good 4.5 years. So the time wasn't like super long, right? It happened pretty quickly. We actually came from the flip first, then to the real estate brokerage, and then started the bigger stuff. So, and I think it's more like Max said, it's kind of organic how it happened. We always spend a lot of time working, and then, always we talk about the extra mile. So at night we would say, okay, what's the next step? So before we actually got into the next big deal, we were already like running the numbers on 100 deals every night that we knew we couldn't do at the time because they're too big, too expensive. We wouldn't have the experience, but we ran like practice scenarios on it. We did designs on houses. We said, we're not going to buy it, but we got to go through the motion of, can you reconfigure it? How do you do it? So we basically, and that's why we always say, even though it's only been 4 years, if you have 2 guys, that's 8 years. And if you work 100 hours a week, that's, so that's how we like got a lot of stuff done in 4 years, because we're a little bit of a workaholic. But then again, we like what we do. So it doesn't feel like it. Like, it's also a hobby. When you come home, you start designing stuff and looking at, tweaking stuff. So we don't mind it.
Yeah. And I guess another thing that helped us a lot is we fairly quickly aligned ourselves with people that were a lot more experienced than we were, that guided us. And there's 2 guys in particular that are the co-owners of our brokerage, Miracle and Luxury Real Estate. Those guys have 15, 20 years plus experience. One is an attorney, the other one is an accountant by trade. So you got the perfect combination. They've developed and flipped so many deals and major projects. So having those guys in our corner, understanding how to stay out of trouble, do the underwriting conservatively, and kind of understand when is a deal and when is a time to maybe not do the deal, and understanding also that one of the best deals are the ones that you actually don't do, right? So those guys, I mean, just huge credit to them. We weren't where we are today without them, for sure.
It's awesome. I mean, you have to have a good mentor. And as I think through this, and for those listening, what's unique about your projects, these aren't normal. They're not flat lot, small builds, right? A lot of these are really complicated. You're building in a canyon, you're building on a hillside. These are projects I do for my customers, and there's a lot of complexity, right? There's a lot of unforeseen, unanticipated costs. And you mentioned this early on, Patrick. Here we are last year, you're dealing with COVID, you're dealing with price escalation. So how are you managing, when you talk about that feasibility study and you're doing all that research, and you did mention this, that, hey, we spent a lot of time, even though we weren't doing the deals, we're doing the research. We're saying, what would this sell for? How much would it cost? How do we change this floor plan? And so mentally, you're preparing yourself. You're doing that homework in preparation for where you are today. How is that affected now? Because when you're looking at a deal and you have investors lined up, you have a development lined up, costs are rising. How does that affect? How do you bob and weave now to adjust with that to make sure the sell price will now meet the demand? There'll still be a demand. You can hit appraisals, all the complication that goes with it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the last 18 months were kind of a little special for everyone, right? It's hard to predict a global pandemic. But I guess especially in Arizona, we and you always need a little bit of luck, right? I think everybody got lucky in Arizona that prices and lead times, went all over the place. But the market was so strong that way outpaced the increase of materials and everything. So yeah, our cost went up, but the finished product was worth a lot more too. So it kind of like the market held everybody on track, right? As far as the extra costs were covered. Yeah, I mean, but like Max said, we're very conservative, and we're not trying to hit a record on every deal we do, right? There's a lot of people that always say, oh, the most expensive house sold for $2 million. I'm going to build one for 2.8, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to crush the record. Max and I are always the ones, hey, everything sells around 2 to 2.3. Let's do a nice house for 1.995.
Yeah.
So we're the best alternative on the block. You don't have to go too crazy, and it's going to sell. And the other thing we always keep an eye on, and that's why we're a big fan of your work, is like you got to have a good quality product. Because if the market does change, slow down, the first thing that's going to sit is the stuff that people cut corners or the quality wasn't right. Because right now it's hard to even get your hands on a nice new build because they sell so fast. If the market changes and all of a sudden there's 10 on the market, everybody's going to go to the best product first. So that's kind of our approach, saying, okay, we got to do a clean product. We don't have to crush, like the profits don't have to be through the roof. Let's make a good number that's worth everybody's time and effort. And do a good product, sell it, move on to the next one. So that's why we're pre-selling pretty much 80% of our stuff before we even get to drywall. So because we're priced where we should be, so not trying to
It's interesting. And I love that you share that, Patrick, because what I don't think most people realize and why I appreciate what you both are doing is that you are looking at the quality and the type of construction and the design. And that's not the case. I mean, the unfortunate thing is in town, I've walked a lot of homes, for clients that are buying their investor homes, and you walk through the house and immediately as a builder, I'm looking at this house, like the quality's not there. You can tell that the developer's just trying to flip and make a buck. And it's discouraging for the client because they're going to have to come in now and put their own dollars in and remodel it, even though it's a new build essentially. But even to that point, Patrick, I mean, what you're speaking about is that even though you're targeting a certain market, there's a lot of research and as far as identifying, well, what happens if something goes belly up, right? Are we in the right price? Are we the biggest home in the neighborhood? Are we right where we need to be? We have the value there, the quality's there. And so that when all things fail, if they do, we're still going to be at the top of the list because we've done our due diligence.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that when we talked about it, I think we always try to make sure that like you said, good quality, do the right thing, make sure that you touch. We always say touch every room, right? Because a lot of times when you walk a spec, you see a lot of white drywall, right?
Yeah,
and then you're like, okay, that's nice. So we get a starting point, right? But that's a finished product for most specs, right? The stucco box is
stucco and drywall.
Buy this for $6 million, and then they spend $1 million on wallpaper, trim, custom this, custom that, AV systems. So we have one kind of slogan that we go with for ourselves, and we always say our spec is somebody else's custom, right? So whoever's going to buy our spec, to them, that's their custom home, that's their dream home. So we try to think, okay, if this would be my house and I would build my dream home, I would not have everything just, there needs to be some wallpaper in the master bedroom, and there needs to be some tile in the entryway. Like there needs to be stuff that that people appreciate when they walk through the house and can tell that you at least touched one wall in each room to make sure that every room, feels like somebody already worked on it and it's move-in ready rather than, okay, now we got a starting point. Now we got to figure everything out ourselves.
So with that mentality, and I love that slogan, that our spec is someone else's custom. So how involved do both of you get, as far as the design, the architecture, the layout of any new project?
It kind of depends on the project. On the projects that we do for ourselves with our investment group, we're hands-on start to finish. And then there's other projects or collaborations. For example, you mentioned the Canyon, right? Mm-hmm. Crown Canyon, for example, we partnered up with Bedrock, who is the builder and developer, where we give our feedback and we kind of contribute to the opinion of what's the best product for resale, right? What are some features? And I mean, the lineup there with Mara, interior design, Bedrock, I mean, it's just great. And then collaborating there and trying to put the best thing together in a team effort, that's what we enjoy on that end a lot.
And so with the Bedrock one, like that project, that's where you're the listing agent, you're working with them to sell all the development that they're doing. And that's where they really do want your opinion because you're selling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Doing all the marketing, all the costs involved, to publish this project.
Correct.
So how does that work, when you're working with a developer such as that project, how does that differ in your marketing strategy, or who are you marketing to? Is this local? Is this national? Are there certain cities where you're seeing more of an influx and that's who you're targeting?
So just like we do our homework on the research for the deal analysis and that end, we do the same thing on the marketing side. I mean, we do understand where the buyers come from, whether they relocate nationally from north to south, right? Because there's a trend of people moving on DC Ranch, Silvercrest area down to Paradise Valley.
And real quick, if I interrupt you, it's interesting you say that because I think that's missed by a lot of people. And then for those listening here in Phoenix, you have a lot of people that live in North Scottsdale that are a long ways either from the airport or they're traveling or they want to downsize or they want to be closer to the city. And that's where a lot of them do end up selling their property up there and coming into town.
Correct. And then obviously out of state, we have a high influx of out of state clients that we see on our projects. We see that on our listings. So understanding what their needs are, where they come from, and then strategically market to them on all channels. That's what we do on that end.
And then how much support do you have with the brokerage itself, with the reputation nationally and, other realtors and brokers across the country?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously more like a boutique setup, right? We have just over 20 agents now that we built up from starting with 1 to 4 years ago to now about 20, and we're not trying to become big. Like that's a very good number. We don't want to get too big, but you have to be able to have the manpower to for bigger developments projects, that agents jump on the phone with you and start calling out of state top brokers and say, hey, we have a product here. If you guys have anybody moving to Arizona that's looking in the 10 million, like you have to be kind of proactive about a lot of stuff. And we have we're like very lucky that we have a great team spirit in our brokerage, and everybody's, just jumping in, helping each other. And then that puts a lot of manpower behind everything we do, rather than if it's 1 or 2 agents or a small team, and then everybody does their own. With us, it's more like, a team effort. So that helps a lot, to get the message out there on what we do.
And when you guys are looking at your own development, as you mentioned, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of feasibility studies you're doing right on the market and cost and the project itself and how much development is involved, from site work and so forth. And so when you're going through that and you're working with investors, is it typically always 100% privately invested? Are you working with banks and leveraging that? Is there a combo of both?
It's usually a combo of both. And again, going back to the partners that we have, that's one of the things that we learned quickly, pretty early on as well, understanding what are the different avenues to put a deal together, right? Leveraging from debt facilities like local banks. Our main partner is First Bank. When it comes to financing through banks, there's soft money as well too, right? It's not only always bank or hard money. And then the combination of that with investors, where we have equity as well as debt structures that work there, I guess leave room to pretty much put any deal together if we want to. And then it's all about timing on that end. I mean, there's several deals that maybe at a certain time we were not able to do because we didn't have the capital, or we had the capital already placed. And then, a couple of months later, it actually ended up working out. And that deal that we thought was not going to happen actually happened. That happened a couple of times already. So timing is everything. So the right deal at the right time. We do not have investment money with us that we need to put to work immediately. That's the next thing. So the position that we are in is kind of ready to pull the trigger when we see something good, but we don't have to get involved into a deal just to do a deal. So there's no institutional money or anything that we have that needs to be placed. Because we get the question always from investors, when is the next deal coming around? I don't know. Maybe in an
tomorrow,
hour.
could be in 6 months.
And that can go pretty quickly. So I guess that's a setup that enables us to be selective about the deals that we do.
And it's interesting to bring that up, Max, and maybe I'll pick your brain. Do you feel that this gives you a little bit more flexibility and strength in the market, where you can pick and select and handpick different projects? And the reason I say this is because I have spoken with other investors, especially in the real estate market, where they're working with a fund, right? And they have to place this money. And so they're coming, they're buying stuff. And they do say on occasion, it's not like there's a ton of, they're still doing the research, but it's not to the same depth that you're doing it, because they're having to place these funds, as opposed to, no, we're going to strategically place them and then we're going to go raise the capital.
I agree with you. We are working on a fund. So the trick there is, and that's our strategy when we put that together, is to have that diversified. If it was solely in luxury residential development, I would kind of contradict with what I said a minute ago. However, if you understand how to diversify that and bring in commercial and other investment opportunities on the real estate side that we can take on, then it becomes a little bit different, because the fund itself then is diversified. You have some cash flowing assets, you have some development, some is commercial, some is residential, and then it works at a certain size. And our partners have worked with a private equity fund, I think around $200 million fund they had, and worked. So we understand what that means, not because we did it, but again, our partners have done it. So we're able to put that together and kind of cover everything on the residential side, bring in investors and partners that we've been working with from back home which, half of our investors are from back home, Germany, and the other half are from here. So then it makes sense. And I think we can make that work, especially with the right expectation, understanding how long it takes to place that money.
So what's interesting, Max, and maybe speak about this side, the investor side, when, a lot of young builders I speak with from the building side, they say, well, how do we build our name and reputation? Well, part of it is, as a young builder or architect or designer, you got to get a stake in the ground, right? You have to get a sign up. And the way to do that is maybe you go build a spec, because getting a build to suit where a client's hiring you to build their house, well, if you don't have a resume that you've done hillside work, you don't have a resume that you've built an 8,000 square foot house, they're going to say, well, why should I hire you, Patrick or Max, right? Because you haven't done this, right? So then one of the ways to loophole, if you will, is, okay, well, I'm going to go build a spec and then another one. And then people see my sign up and they see I can do this, right? So from that mentality, from your side, as you're working with investors, it's almost the same thing. As you're starting to build your brand, Max and Patrick, and you guys are building credibility, you're going to have to say, yeah, we've had good ROIs on our projects and our developments. We know what we're doing. We're more savvy in the market now. We know the investments to chase. How do you start building that resource pool of who wants to invest? And you mentioned back home in Germany, here in the US. How does that continue to expand, and where did it start?
It started with referrals. It's going with referrals, and it will always be referrals. That's the base of the business that we build up here, whether that's the brokerage side or the development side. And, that keeps it more boutique. It keeps it more exclusive. There's no public solicitation for any funds. You can't go on our website and say, invest with us today.
Yeah.
So for us, the personal relationships that we have been building and that we are building, that's our biggest asset. So we will continue to do that.
And how, with your investors, how involved are they with each project? Do they have any concerns of risk? One thing Patrick mentioned early on is you talked about a lot of your projects are pre-sold. Well, one of the benefits is that from an investor portion, well, you have a commitment, right? There's going to be dollars tied in escrow from who's ever purchasing the project, and the house is sold, so you can run the numbers and you kind of know what your outlook's going to be. The only risk to that is that if costs increase, right? If there's material increase, the market goes up, could have sold it for more. So so how risk adverse are your investors?
I think it depends on and like Max said, because it's very boutique, and every investor we work with, or they came through a referral, and you kind of like, same thing, you do your homework on both sides for a couple of months. It's not like somebody can just call and say, hey, I want to put $500,000 with you guys tomorrow. We would say, no, wait, let's grab lunch, let's talk to that guy, let's walk some of we want to make sure that they know, right? And we also, like you said earlier, I think one of the biggest things is you got to be honest, right? Like, you got to tell them, like, hey, we've never done this type of spec before. We've never done a 9,000 hillside, but there's huge upside. But there's going to be hiccups. It's going to take a little longer. There is a little bit more risk, but there's also a lot more reward on it. So who's fine with it? Like, don't place your money in this deal if you're more like, let's just build a bread and butter that's going to sell, within a week because it's the, perfect starter home. Whatever. Like, there's different, type of investors with different appetite for risk. I would call it that. So we try to strategically place the right guys on the right deals and do the right things. And we give them scenarios. We say, hey, this is the perfect timeline. And we actually put a little scale together. We say the chances that we're going to be 1 month delayed is, 10%. Like, we'll basically say, hey, these are your odds, and basically on budget and timeline on a project like this. So they know, how difficult of a project it could be. And then as far as the pre-selling it, same thing. There's a pros and cons to it, right? If you sell too early, you might have undersold it, right? But there's also a huge benefit to sleeping good at night, knowing it's pre-sold and you got your number locked in, and maybe you're not making 30% ROI, but you're making 25%. But everybody's happy and everybody's sleeping really good for the next 8 months because it's pre-sold, the money's in the bank, the earnest money's released. We have a very good deal structure on how the contracts are written. So again, every investor is different. Some say, hey, I don't mind if we make a little less if we got this, buttoned up. And then there's others that say, no, let's keep this rolling. I don't want anybody in the house until it's staged and done, and let's, put a big number on it. So very different, and it's a good mix between some deals are a little bit more going for a little bigger, and then the other ones are let's keep a couple safe ones.
And it's amazing to listen to this, Patrick, because I think from a communication side, right, that's super important in our business, communication with our customer. And, it's heavy lifting when you're building a house for a customer. There's a lot of emotion involved and there's a lot of dollars they're putting into it. And you're trying to make sure that you're meeting that expectation. And for you, it's both ways. You're not only internally, doing all the research, you're working with the contractor, making sure they're on schedule, but you have investors as well that you're communicating with saying, hey, as you mentioned, we may have a delay or we found some hard dig right on this hillside. It's going to take 2 extra months and another, $60,000 to dig through this hard dig. And so there's constant communication, but that's where you end up building the trust and which will lead to the next project and next deal.
Yeah, and especially in the pre-sold ones, the group of people that get involved gets really big, right? Because now you have us as the listing agents, you have the investors, the builder, the designer, the buyer's agent, the buyer, the buyer's agent, financial advisor, and the buyer's best friend's mother. And that's all of a sudden there's like 10 people that want to discuss if that shower should be 3 feet or 3.5 feet. All of a sudden everybody has an opinion, everybody wants to be involved. So we do send out weekly reports that show exactly what happened the last 7 days. There's some pictures. This is what's scheduled for next week. And, and that way they kind of know what's going on. We've built a trend, which
love it.
Yeah. So we share that with all the investors, as all the buyers.
I think you're the only realtors I know that use Builder Trend. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's same thing. There's some good things and some bad things about it, right? Because they might see it and say, oh, it said, you're going to start stucco last week and it hasn't started. Well, it rained. We got to wait a couple. So you get calls where it's like, didn't really need that call. It didn't change the timeline of the build because we started 4 days late on stucco, So, but they don't know that. They don't know that you're doing other stuff at the same time, and it doesn't really matter if it happens last week, this week, or next week.
It's and some things you just can't see that are actually happening.
Right. So it's good and bad, but we like it because it's a very transparent, open form of if you want to know where it's at, just log in. There's your login, and you get push notifications if I just got one on the way here. Doors and windows have been delivered. Super signs off, so the owner gets their message saying, "Hey, okay, that's a big milestone. Stuff's on site, so that's the next." And so it helps us, have some sort of automated communication, but it also generates extra communication because now there's questions on why stuff hasn't happened or why is that already done, and so that's. But again, transparency, like you said, you got to communicate, you got to keep everybody involved, and ultimately, there's only so much you can do. If the windows are 2 weeks delayed, it's not like I can go somewhere. It's just everybody understands. It's not like I can just go to the next store and buy them there off the rack. Like they ordered, they take 10, 12 weeks, whatever. Right now, it's just longer, and we're all just going to have to wait until they show up. There's nothing we can do. And in the beginning, new investors, so they might be a little bit more like get nervous or frustrated about stuff like that, but then they realize, okay, that's just construction, and we said that from the beginning. There's going to be not just one, there's going to be a lot of hiccups. That's just construction, and it always takes a little longer than you think. And even if you say, I'm going to put a little bit of buffer on it, you're probably going to need a little bit more than the buffer, and the budget is always going to be close, but it's also going to be stuff that gets added as you go, right? Because as you start seeing come together, you're like, yeah, that would be really cool if you do some light features here, or if you do this, or, so you add stuff as you go, and then there's unforeseen costs that could be price increases on material, or, like you said, a hard dig or something that you can't control. So again, before you go in, everybody needs to know that, nobody has a crystal ball, and everybody's planning as good as they can, and everybody's working towards the same goal: build a perfect product as fast as you can, and make everybody happy on all sides. That's the goal. And nobody's sitting at home not doing anything like that. And they pretty quickly understand that, and then they just know, okay, everybody's doing their best, and they're fine with it.
Now, we're super excited to welcome one of our new sponsors to the podcast, Pella Windows. And this is even more exciting because we use Pella in so many of our projects, nearly all of them. And they've been just an incredible partner of ours. And locally, Sammy and Adam, they are not only amazing business partners behind us, but they are super close friends. And I speak on the podcast all the time about the importance of relationships, right? Relationships with our customers, with our vendors, with our suppliers, because at the end of the day, I'm only as good as those that help our brand and assist us in our projects to take it from the ground up all the way to completion. And if we didn't have partners such as Pella, there's no way we'd be who we are today. Over the years, we've built this amazing relationship. When we call them or email them, they respond. They're quick. Their company culture, their integrity, their honesty. They are always there to do what's right for us and the customer. They can do anything from small replacement projects to large custom homes and even multi-million-dollar commercial projects. And also, when you think about their product line, they can do ultra contemporary, historical preservation, and large traditional projects. So for anyone, any scale, any size, they're the ones to call. They're here local. They have an amazing Instagram. Make sure and give them a follow to see what they're doing. So if you need windows and doors, give Sammy and Adam a call. We stand behind Pella. We love what they do, their culture, their brand, and especially their quality. And if you want to learn more about Pella Windows, check our show notes. We'll have everything tagged there so you can give them a follow and have their contact information to reach out. And now let's get back into the episode. It's amazing how composed you both are, because I think about when you go into these deals that are pre-sold and you have 10 parties involved, as you mentioned, and itemized. I mean, I see Max sign here because there's a lot of complication. There's a lot of personalities. You become a little bit more of a psychiatrist and a developer. But this is what's fascinating to me. If you pre-sell it, do you have any limitations to what the client can change or customize? Because now, as you mentioned, you get the example of the shower change. Well, now that the client has pre-sold and purchased the home and they want to make changes, Pandora's box is open. I mean, this sky's the limit. So how do you manage through that?
Yeah, I mean, we've done the dance. We've done it where we changed a lot of stuff, and you change again, right? You're like, oh no, let's just go with this one, and then oh no, let's go back to the original one, and you're like, I just ordered. So we've done that. So we try to limit it a little bit, but then on the other hand, going back to our spec is somebody's custom, right?
Yeah, it's their home. They're paying for it.
They pay $5 million. They should be able to say, I want that shower to be bigger.
Yeah,
and they need to understand that we got to, move plumbing. And it's not just like, oh, we're just going to, add one piece of tile on the side. No, all the plumbing needs to move. Everything needs to move. The vanity size changes. They need to understand the delays and, problems that may cause. So a lot of, again, is expectation management, right? Like you can change, but we'll let you know if how much that's going to add to your timeline and cost, and if that makes sense or not. But we always do once you're going to contract, give them a 30-day inspection period. You know, there's nothing to inspect yet, right? Which that's meeting with the designer, going through all the designs,
the specs,
touch, feel all the finishes, apply. Yeah. And that's where they can come in and do any changes. And then after 30 days, we're basically saying, okay, that's the cutoff. Anything you haven't decided yet is basically now up to the seller to say if we're going to do it or not. Because if you throw us a curveball last minute of, let's add a bedroom on the other side, and now you got to go through permit again, and you added another, 2 months. That's where you have to, say, hey, we whatever we can, we will do, but there's probably going to be one or two things where we have to say it just can't be done at this point anymore.
And I think we've gotten a lot better at dancing on this very kind of fine line between accommodating and kind of staying true and loyal to, kind of our belief, and it's going to be custom home at the end. But also setting expectations right, like the 30 days that Patrick mentioned. That's something that over the years we've been starting to establish, and once it's in writing, they understand, they sign off, and if something comes up along the way, Patrick and I are usually pretty lenient and say, okay, if we can change it, if it hasn't been ordered yet, if there's an extra cost, quick addendum, change order, funds into title, released to us, we place the order, and then we're good. So I think we've gotten a lot better at that. But in the beginning, we were definitely there was no 30 days. So you could pretty much, you want to change something tomorrow. I mean, there were calls almost daily about stuff that, and then a second designer involved. I mean, that was a little bit too much dancing, but I think we've gotten better, and we feel good about it.
Especially where you have a designer in the project and the client buys it, and they have their own relationship, their own designer, and that's where you have the two parties, as you mentioned.
Yep.
It's so interesting. And so when you think about that, and this is really important, for, as we've tried to be better as a company, you think about streamlining, as you mentioned, Max. I mean, you learn by mistake, and you say, well, this didn't work. I didn't set this expectation properly. I didn't communicate this right. And that's what drives a wedge in the relationship or the project success, right? And so you start to fine tune that. You work with your team, and you say, okay, well, we can do this, this, and this. And now we set the project up for success moving forward, which is really key as you evaluate and do that kind of biopsy of every project, right? So going back to this, I mean, especially in development right now, one thing we're struggling with is permits, right? It's taking a long time to get through design, through architecture, through permit. Has that affected any deals that you have on the table? Because permits typically, you'd get in 8 to 12 weeks, and now they could take upwards of 6 to 8 months because of civil, grading and drainage, a lot of complexity, that 100-year flood zones here in town. I mean, how has that affected projects you have?
It definitely affected projects as far as the timeline is concerned. So I guess that's everybody's in the same boat on that end. However, like Patrick said, I think the market right now is still strong, has been going strong, much better than probably anyone would expect when the pandemic started. So we're trying to, I think we're good with that. The actual appreciation of the market and the time that it gives us with a lot of projects, Patrick goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, is there anything that we can do better? Is there anything that we can value engineer on this particular project to create more value? So that kind of a downtime, we try to be as proactive as possible. And we understand the city is not going to move faster. So we just have to use the time the best way possible and see what is there that we can do to kind of mitigate that or add something to that to make it less hurtful as far as the project outcome goes.
What's that preparation, right? I mean, if you're spending that time now, even though it's delayed at the city, and you're preparing schedule or timing, or as you're saying, looking at the engineering or design, if we know, hey, this window we want's amazing, but we know it's coming from Portugal and it may get stuck in the port, and then, maybe we change it to this window that's here local and we can get it quicker. So then our build time changes.
Yeah, and especially finishes or little features that we put in the houses that will make the product stick out once it hits the market. And like Patrick mentioned, if the market softens, correct itself, which at some point will happen, we all know that. We want to make sure that we have a product on the market available that has things outside of quality, but also finishes where you say, okay, I haven't seen that in a house in Arizona. So we always look to different markets. We look back home. We have a lot of resources that give us inspiration to make a difference.
It's really smart. I mean, I think about what they're doing in Europe, and as you mentioned, being that you're both from Germany, and some of the innovation and technology and design, in that part of the world, they're so advanced, right? And I know a lot of the designers and architects I work with travel there on occasion. I mean, now it's been tough with COVID, of course, but so this is almost like a little cheat sheet where you're networking and doing research outside of our market to see what other people are doing, and how can you bring that influence here into Phoenix?
Yeah, that's the only thing that we had when we came here. We didn't have anything else. So I guess since we started in this business, we've always done that. And it's naturally too, because we are not from here. We have family, we have friends, business partners, investors, so overseas in different states. So not using that resource would be
detrimental. Would be stupid to not.
For sure.
And I think one thing that we've heard many times that made us question something about it is when we started doing design work or on our spec, we're like, okay, let's we're working on a project right now where it's like a big atrium with a water feature, tree in the middle, uplighting, like it has glass to the master, to the exercise room. So stuff that you, especially in specs, don't see, right? In customs, it's really hard to see a lot in customs because everybody only builds so many, and
right.
A lot of the really nice ones, other than the actual builder design, I never get to see because a lot of the owners are very private about it. So we try to do stuff that we see in other markets, and every time we do stuff like that, in one of the houses we have a 22-foot tall waterfall in the entry foyer where you come in, like a water feature, right? So everybody's like, yeah, you don't have to do that. And that came up all the time, right? The architect would say, the design, everybody would say, we don't have to do that in Arizona. Like, nobody does it. Like, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. It's just saying that nobody's doing it because, you can get away with not doing it. But again, if you want somebody be happy with the product and be wowed by it, you got to do something that everybody else thinks they don't have to do, right? Reset light coves and there's so many different little things around the house that add up very quickly, as we all know. But that everybody says, well, you don't have to do it. Like, it'll sell without it, right?
It's almost a motivating factor on the build and development side as well as on the real estate side. I mean, when Patrick and I said we want to do luxury, the first thing that we did, we actually changed the DBA of our brokerage from America One Realty Services to America One Luxury Real Estate. We got T-shirts done, and that was it. And There were a lot of people in town that kind of laughed about it and said, you guys can't do that. There's so many established players here. It's such a tight market. You have no experience. And same thing there. Like, why not? Why can't you do it? So it's almost a catalyst for us and a motivating factor when we get these kind of comments, and they kind of fuel us even more to get it done. So
I love that you share that, Max, because when you think about it, this catalyst for you both is that you're coming into a market that, as you mentioned, there's players in town, they have reputations, they've done this, and what's interesting is you look at people that are successful in life, and it's always a consistent theme. It's like, if you want to be great, you have to be consistently good, right? And yes, hard work is beyond important, as you both have mentioned, doing all that research and time, preparing yourself. And then, as you said, but you have the vision, hey, we want to be in luxury. We're going to start here on this flip, but we know where we're going down the road. We're going to be here in 4 years. And having that mindset, having that consistent work ethic and constantly good will make you great, is that consistency. And that's what is the driver behind you both.
That's true, yeah.
And so how's that now? So what keeps you up at night now? Like the risk, because going into the luxury market, there's a lot of risk. And so what is it that stresses you out, the risk that you have now that takes, that heavy?
I think as far as the risk, we feel pretty good, just because of how we said we were very conservative on when we run the numbers and on what we think it can sell for and what we're going to be in it. So we're very conservative. 95% of our projects we've beaten the projections, and most of the time by a lot, and not because of anything crazy, but just because the bar was set kind of low from us, right? Everybody's like, if we do this, we're great, right? And then over deliver. That's kind of how we've been doing it. So I think the only thing that kind of keeps us up at night is more like the in a positive way, but the anxiety. You want to get going. You want to like you said, permit takes a long time, right? And you keep going up to that lot, and you like, I wish it was like a wall up right now, right? So it's more that, and then at some point you get investors and buyers and people that are like, they start then like, hey, I'm excited. When is it going to start? And like, might be in 2 weeks, might be in 8 weeks. We don't know. Like the kick all the city, they're going to tell you they don't know. Like they're going to get to it when they get to it. So that's more not like risk that keeps us up. It's more like
just the anxiety, that drive of trying to get these projects up and going.
Yeah, and it's almost more like a excitement than anxiety, right? Because it gets fun once you start seeing walls come up and you start seeing it come to life. So, and we do have 4 projects right now that are like the permit could come in like tomorrow, right? On 4 of them. So that's a little bit of a positive, but also a little bit of a negative, because now you got to frame 7,000 square foot houses at the same time, right?
Because they all hit at once. It always is that way.
Yeah.
You have them spaced maybe 45 days apart, and they all hit at once.
Exactly, and that's kind of what happened to us. And happened from septic permit, and that house pushed that one back, and then this one all of a sudden we submitted one that kind of flew, like it just. Like everything went perfect, no red lines here, this, and we're like, how did we get this one so fast, right? And other ones are red lines on the demo permit because, they forgot to, little stuff, the stuff where you makes scratch your head and say, did you guys really send that back because of this? Like, isn't that kind of obvious, or can you, it's, so that's the stuff that's more frustrating, because now you got to go back to everyone and tell everyone what's, it's going to be delayed. But can't change it. And again, communication going into everything, being upfront about it, being honest about it. Same thing we did on like Max said, when we went to the luxury market. We always get into a listing appointment and the seller says, have you sold a house for 4 million before, right? That question, like you said, same on the builder side, when they ask you, like, have you done this before, right? And we always said, let's make that a positive thing, that we haven't, right? We're like, no, we have not. And that's exactly why we're going to do a better job than anybody else, because this is going to be our baby. This is going to be, we can't screw this one up, right? Because that's the first one. So we'll make sure that there's nothing that we could do better or anybody else could have done better for you. So if you give us a shot, we'll get it done for you. So we did that, and luckily we had people that trusted us and said, you know what, I got a good feeling about you guys. You guys are high energy, or you're at least you're honest. You're not bullshitting me going into this. So, I'll give you 90 days. Let's see what happens. And then, again, between us being very proactive and kind of workaholics and a little bit of luck, right? That's also part of it, right? You get the right buyer come into town that, might have not seen the house before. Like so just a little bit of timing again, like Max said, and all of a sudden we got the first one for 1.6 and 1.22, and kind of work your way up, and now you got a 6, and now we got a 10, and all of a sudden now you get the call, and it's like, have you sold a house for 4? Yes, right now you can say it, but in the beginning you can almost like make it a positive thing that you haven't, right? If you pitch it the right way.
I remember when we were kind of passing that $4 million mark, and we're like, okay, so we have this project for $4 million. And now when I think about the conversations I've daily with, the local agents, that are all very well respected. We keep amazing relationships with all of them. It's all I talk about with them is when you have someone 5 million up, modern contemporary, call us. Because that's all we have pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only one or two, it's like a couple. So, sometimes you have these conversations. I had one this morning, I hung up the phone, I'm like, that's all we do. And like a year or two, we had one. So, so the trajectory and kind of the brand that we're trying to establish is the modern contemporary developments in Paradise Valley. That's what we love. That's what we're passionate about. And it's cool to see that there's not a lot, but there's a very few people that do a lot of business, especially in Paradise Valley. And having those relationships there, the same way we have it with investors, partners, and clients, being collaborative, being open and resourceful, transparent. I mean, with agents say I run them through our deals and say, okay, this is how we do it. This is how we set it up. There's technically no secret with that. So being a resource there on both ends and kind of seeing it as a two-way street has helped us a lot.
It's interesting because you've been focused on your growth and getting into that luxury market, and then taking this project, growing it into the next one and growing it into the next one. And you mentioned this early on, Max. You said, sometimes the best projects are the ones that you don't get, but it's hard at the time to deal with that frustration or discouragement by not being awarded or not getting it or getting the listing, because mentally you're like, I was prepared. I did all the work. This is going to like set the tone, and I didn't get it. Was there a time when both of you were ever discouraged, saying, hey, we know where we want to be. We're not there. We didn't get this deal. Now what? How do we pivot? Now what? Are we really going to get there?
So the discouragement is fuel for us, has always been like that. And I remember in particular, our first listing that was the first deal that we did over 2 million. The client came to the office. We had the listing agreement. Actually, everything was printed out. Ready to sign. And that's actually what we thought was going to happen that day. But he came in and he said, yeah, I can't give you the listing right now. Like, it was pre-framing at that point. But they said, I have other partners and right now I can't do it. And there's other agents. There's so many of us out there. And I remember when the guy actually left the office, at first I couldn't believe it. But the next thing, the actual first thing that Patrick and I talked about, we said, we're going to get this. We're not going to let this go. 3 months later, they signed, broke a record in that neighborhood, and that was our first $2 million deal. So that was on the listing side. The reason I'm sharing that is even if something doesn't work out quite at this moment, it doesn't mean that if you hang in there that you can't get it done. Maybe that's exactly because you get it done, because you hang in there, right? One of the projects that we're the most passionate about, building something pretty spectacular up in Clearwater Hills, one of the 4 projects that we're currently going in there. That one was on and off the table for so long. And I don't know how many people looked at it and said, no, that's too crazy. It's too crazy. I can't do it. You need to tear it down. Offered it to 2-3 investors. We ended up doing it ourselves 8-9 months later. So just because something doesn't happen quite at this moment, that actually, I almost think like that's when you need to prove yourself, or that's when you show how bad you want it. And that doesn't mean at the end, there's some things that maybe don't end up working out, right? Where that thing is like dead in the water, but that's fine. At least we know for ourselves, we always give it our best. And there's countless stories and deals where probably 99% would have said, you know what, that it's just done, but it's not done. So I think we've always done that.
That
Helps.
perseverance. Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to this too, Patrick, when you're talking about just these deals, and put them together, how long does a deal typically take? Because for those listening, this isn't like a 3-month process, right? There's a lot of time. So when you look at these deals and say, hey, this is a venture we want to pursue, what's that time frame?
I mean, most of the bigger stuff right now, start to finish, probably 12 to 18 months. And again, with like a lot of the good deals you get sent off market from other agents, they're like, hey, I got something coming. I know that might be right up your alley, right? So you look at it. The one that Max just mentioned, you show it to 2 different investor clients of ours, where they're not our investors, but like people that we represent as an agent, and say, hey, you're always looking for a project. I think this would be one, right? They both passed on it. And then we did it, and both called and said, did you just buy that deal? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, right? We wouldn't send it to you if we don't think it's a good deal.
Yeah.
And they're like, why didn't you do it right away? We're like, well, first of all, because you're a client, you ask us for a deal, so we want to get you a deal first. Like, we send it to you first. Plus, for us, the timing was a little off, right? And then, like Max said, it took 6-7 months. And by that time, our funds were ready, everything made sense. And then we put a deal together. And then we also, again, going back to the homework that we're doing before, we're already looking at, okay, what's the building envelope? What can we do? What are the comps? What are the opportunities? What are the catches on that deal potentially? So you kind of look through all that. And so when we start, we kind of already had, a 6-8 week soft start before, where we're not like, oh, okay, now it starts. When it starts, we're already like, this is where we're going to start, because we already did a lot of work before. So that takes a little bit of time off. And then again, the last 18 months, obviously, it's a little bit difficult for everyone to precisely project a completion date, because even your subs sometimes can't tell you when they're going to get, shotcrete is one of the things right now that we see, where they're like, they used to do rebar, and 2 days later you come back and the pool is done, and you're like, when were they here, right?
Yeah, it's 3 months later.
Yeah, now it's like going to be 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and you're like, okay, and it's can't do anything about it. So right now it's a little bit more difficult. So it might be closer to 18 months. If it's a big hillside, it might be even more than that. And if you're lucky, the one that we just got everything approved, that might be 11 months, because how fast everything went, and that there was a almost 3 months under contract period where all the plans and designs were pretty much done by the time we closed. So it varies.
And what brought you both to Phoenix?
Vacation initially.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were you in Germany at the time?
I was in Germany at the time. One of my close friends is a good golfer, so he has a place here, and he said, one night over dinner, he's like, you got to come to Scottsdale. It's perfect. You can play golf. We can go out. There's Old Town. There's good restaurants. The whole thing. So I'm like, all right, I'll be there, right? And I came out. I was supposed to stay 3 weeks. Ended up staying 2 months because I liked it, and then I came back once or twice after that. And then one day, him and I and another friend of ours were just out in Germany, and I said, we should just do like a Vegas, Scottsdale, like LA trip.
It was 2 a.m.
Yeah.
There might have been a couple of drinks involved when we actually booked the flight.
Yeah, we booked the flights at 3 a.m. on the phone. But it was a good, we came here, and the Max says that's actually a good spot, right? It's convenient, it's safe, it's nice, there's a lot of opportunity, and so yeah, technically really by chance, like it wasn't a specific market that we targeted or anything. It was just like, it's a good spot and let's go. And we always said that America in general is the one place probably where if you go crazy on work, you're going to get rewarded in the same amount. There's nothing that holds you back. There's nothing that limits you. That's just a unique thing. And that's what we've been trying to do every day since we got here.
And how does Phoenix compare to other luxury markets? Now that you're in the luxury market and you're doing some of the top product, here in our market, how do you feel that compares? Do you feel that demand will continue?
It almost feels like a little bit of a juvenile market, right? And probably one of the cities where, especially talking about our niche market, the modern contemporary homes, where you look at LA. I mean, we recently went there on a business trip. I mean, you go through Beverly Hills. I mean, it's just completely on another level there, right? Price points as well as finishes and products. So we're starting to see that here in the market, and we believe there's a lot of opportunity, not only because of influx of out-of-state buyers, but there's so much potential here, and embedding modern architecture into kind of the desert feel is just amazing. I mean, your homes, our homes, Crown Canyon. There's so many other properties that you look at, and you're like, it's just amazing how that looks, but there's not a lot out here yet, and I feel like price points are getting higher and higher as far as resale values. Right, 1,000 a foot is almost not standard, but you see it a lot. Not only asking but also closing. Now you see 1,500 a square foot.
Before.
Yeah. So,
and I think part of that too is the HOAs. One of the challenges, there are HOAs in town that restrict certain designs, and so you saw that you couldn't build a modern house in Silverleaf in parts of town. And then now as that's changed, and we have some outside of these HOAs where they're like super modern, Scandinavian modern, that European flair coming in, a couple homes we're doing in town. And that is changing it because people are seeing that and be like, I want that. I'm something different than what has been commonplace here in town.
Yeah. So I feel there's still so much to go, and we're excited to be part of that and contribute to this beautiful town here, because it's truly amazing. We couldn't imagine living anywhere else.
And that's a big move. I mean, Germany to Phoenix, that's a huge change. So what do you guys do for fun now? How's that transition been? Do you get homesick?
No, I mean, we always talk about it. I mean, and obviously there's a benefit of having a close friend and partnership, business partnership and all that stuff. So it's, you bring a little bit of home with you, right? So it's not like you're a one-off now. So we actually text in English, but when we talk, we speak German. It's just how that happened over the last couple of years, but so that helped a lot. Again, I think it's a good place to live, so we don't necessarily miss anything. What you miss the most is family, friends, all that stuff, right? To like just hit up your friends and say, let's grab a beer, right? That's kind of one thing that you miss. But it's part of everything we do, and again, we got each other. We got I got a baby now. I got a wife. You build your life pretty quickly wherever you go, and it becomes your new home. So and we met so many great people here, and I mean, we still work 90 hours a week, so there's not that much time right now to enjoy or miss anything. But I think as we get maybe more established and can actually maybe take a weekend off more than once a year, then we can maybe start enjoying and start picking up some hobbies and traveling a bit more and stuff. But right now it's just a grind time until we get to a certain point that we've set ourselves to achieve, and then we can take it down a notch and maybe only work 60 hours a week.
So how's your English so good? Both of you. I mean, it's phenomenal.
We learn it in school back home. It's standard. It's kind of the first foreign language that you learn. I went to an international school after I went to German. So I graduated at an international school. So last like 2-3 years. We speak it every day. So I guess that helps. A lot. There's still a couple of words. There you go. There's still a couple of words sometimes where, I've never heard those before. I remember when we took the test to be a licensed real estate agent. I mean, it was a mix of like translating 80% and then understanding the question. I mean, those things are. You kind of underestimate that, even though we have good education back home. There's obviously very specific lingo in the real estate world, and then Americans are excellent at acronyms.
Yep.
Which we're getting there, but there's still a lot of things that you just try to figure out. But when we speak, or like in an interview situation right now, we typically don't have to translate in our head. By now, it just flows. So. That certainly helps. Accent's not going away. I don't think so. But
it's so minimal though. Like honestly, it's hardly recognizable. Even when I first met you, I mean, I was super amazed. It's incredible. And now here you guys are. I mean, living in Phoenix, Forbes magazine, Entrepreneur magazine. I mean, you guys doing some amazing things. So what else is upcoming and exciting for you?
I mean, like I said, we still trying to achieve the next best thing, and kind of like try to build out everything we've started the last 4 years. Because, if you build a business, 4 years is not a long time. Like there's a lot of foundation work that you have to do to build it all up correctly to where someday you maybe can, like I said, remove yourself for a couple of days and everything still keeps going. And so I think we still have a lot of work to do to, in the trenches, right? Like actually hands-on. We're looking into potentially Florida as a second market at some point, because there's connections there and there's ways for us to get a jump start. Especially with European investors, they love Florida. That's, they know Florida, they know New York and LA. Those are the three, places they all know and go to. So when we first started Phoenix, they're like, where's Phoenix? What is that? Is that, is that even like a city, or is that,
Is that a bird?
Yeah, like it's, and that changed a lot in the last 5 years even, right? Phoenix and Scottsdale, everything got put on the map over the last couple of years, like outside of the US and even within the US, to see a lot more. But yeah, I think that's the next step. But again, I think the overall, we keep reminding ourselves, when we text almost every day that, there's health and family and there's other stuff that come first. And right now we're fortunate enough that we can focus on the business because everything else is going really well. But yeah, the goal is obviously to establish the business more and then to be able to maybe enjoy the family time and that stuff a little bit more.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So where can our listeners find you?
So on our website, maxandpatrick.com, try to keep it simple and memorable. Our brokerage is America One, realestate.com. We both have Instagram accounts. Mine is Max_America1. Patrick's is Patrick_America1. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
Well, we'll get you guys tagged here in the show notes, and can't thank you enough for making time today and appreciate all you're doing here in town.
Thank you so much for having us, Brett.
Thank you.
So thank you all for tuning into the podcast today. And just as a recap, if you check the show notes, they're just going to have all the links for the topics that we discuss. And also one of our favorite features now is the chapters that go through the conversation. So if there's certain topics you want to revisit or listen to, they're outlined by the time that we discuss those. And again, we can't thank you enough for all of your support. Please make sure and download our podcast, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you download your podcast.